Hey everyone, for this week's episode, we're going to be talking about how I made my picture of the eclipse with the blue bonnets. So stay tuned to this episode. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. And during this week, I want to talk a little bit about how I made this specific image with the solar eclipse that happened last week with the blue bonnets. So, a little bit of history first. So, back in 2017, we had our first solar eclipse in my lifetime that crossed through the United States. And everybody was talking about how it was going to be very crowded and the roads were going to be on gridlock. And I really didn't know how to photograph a solar eclipse and I didn't have the equipment. So I decided not to see it. And on the day of, I went out and I photographed wildlife that were going to be exhibiting some unique behavior during the eclipse. I was in California, so the totality was about 70%. And at the moment of what was the 70% totality, I did had some eclipse glasses. I looked up, I saw it, and I was just really disappointed that I didn't go out and see the totality. I really wish I had, and there was some incredible pictures that came out of that. So for the last 7 years, I've been thinking about it. And a couple of years ago, I moved to Texas and I realized that the next solar eclipse, the one that happened this year, was going to be coming right through where I lived. I was so excited. But the best part of it was that it was going to happen in April, which is when the Texas wildflowers are in full bloom. I thought this was such a cool opportunity to be able to not just capture a total solar eclipse, but to be able to capture it in a unique way that very few people in the world would be able to see it as. So I started planning. I found a location that was going to be at full totality, and people started saying they wanted to do a workshop and an eclipse event. So I coordinated with a couple other photographers and the North American Nature Photographers Association. And together we came up with a regional event that was surrounded for the wildflowers and the eclipse. So we found this location, Marble Falls. It's a recreation area, place where people camp. It's called Turkey Bend Recreational Area. And we decided that we were going to rent out a couple of campsites so that we could have as many participants as possible. We ended up with 23 participants and 3 leaders, so big event. And we knew that, it was always a possibility we might get clouded out, which was a big fear of ours because we wouldn't be able to see the eclipse if it was too cloudy. But it was a risk we were willing to take. And we knew that even if it was cloudy, we'd be able to photograph wildflowers. And those were always a big favorite of people coming to Texas in April. So we did make it out there. The prediction for the weather was cloudy. It was going to be thundering and lightning and raining and cloudy, and people were freaking out. And in the end, we just kind of decided it is what it is. We're not going to go to a different location because the options weren't very good. I mean, it was going to predicted to be cloudy just about everywhere where the eclipse was going to be happening. So we stuck to it and we had our 2 campsites. On the day of, the weather report changed from thunder and lightning to just pure cloudiness. We got out there and there was a lot of clouds, but there were also little bits of gaps in the clouds where you could see the sun. And the clouds were moving very quickly, which was good for us because it meant that if the clouds were moving, those bits of sun that was visible was going to start peeking through. So as the day progressed and the eclipse began, we started to get phases of the eclipse. It's really important that you just keep photographing throughout the eclipse, trying to get as many of the phases as possible. I used my 180 to 600 millimeter Nikon lens on my Nikon Z9 with a solar filter attached. And I photographed each phase of the eclipse as I could catch them throughout the cloud coverage. My other vision was to capture the wildflowers. Now, I only had one solar filter. I did have 2 cameras with me. The Z50 was my other body. It's the lower end version of the Z series for Nikon. And I knew that the most important images were going to be coming out of the telephoto lens. Anything that I captured from the telephoto would have allowed me to composite the scene after the fact. Whereas if I had captured the scene in the moment, I risked not being able to capture the different phases of totality, which is like the diamond ring, Bailey's beads, and the Prometheus, all of those things that happen, the cornea, all those beautiful things that happen in the very short window that you get totality. So right before totality hit, big giant dark cloud came over us. We were all getting really nervous. It wasn't going to happen. And as totality hit, it was as if the clouds parted, that a miracle happened, and we were able to capture the eclipse. The clouds were still coming and going during totality, so the amount of time that we had to actually capture it was very, very limited. The stress of trying to get it and make sure it happened. I did snap a few pictures with the other camera, but they didn't turn out. The reality is sometimes that happens, and I made a judgment choice in the moment to focus all of my attention on the telephoto and get all of the phases, which actually worked out really great. Some incredible pictures of the different types of things happening during totality. After the eclipse was over and the clouds moved in, I did snap a photo of the scene that I saw. I got really, really low. The area I was sitting in Turkey Bend has a hill, which allowed me to use extremely wide angle lens. I was at 17 millimeters. I used an extreme wide angle lens, which compresses down using the hill from where the sun is in the sky. The sun was very high in the sky. We're talking it was 1:30 during totality. So when I finally did capture this scene, it was closer to 3 o'clock. So the sun had moved slightly, but it was still very close to the original location. With using the wide angle and getting down all the way to the ground, I was able to see where the sun was in the sky, peeking through the clouds. After the eclipse was over, I went home and I composited two scenes. A composite is when you're taking two or more photos. Sometimes it's from the same time, sometimes it's from different times, sometimes it's from different areas. In this case, it was the same location within an hour and a half apart. And I photographed using that very wide angle. I looked for where the sun was in the sky. The sun does appear in the original photograph. And I lined up the glow. It was behind clouds. Like I said, at this point, it was completely clouded over. So I tried to line up where the sun was during the eclipse to the glow of the sun in the sky. Now, because I'm using a 600 millimeter lens for the actual image that was created for the eclipse, and I'm using an extreme wide angle lens for the landscape, the actual like ratio is going to be off. It has to be. But to me, that was okay because this isn't meant to be a scientific image that is an accurate depiction of what I saw. This is an image of what I remember it being like, the image that I saw in my mind for years to come, and the image that I was able to create from the moment of totality captured with the landscape that I was in. So I hope that clears up any questions on how I created it. It is definitely not a scientific image. Anyone who is concerned about those images saying, oh, but the ratio is off, it is. You're 100% right. But it's not meant to fool anyone or, make a misleading representation of what the image is. It's a artistic rendering of the scene that I saw, and I hope you enjoy it. I posted it on Facebook. It's had over 100,000 views. About 95% of people really liked it. They shared it. I've had many, many shares, lots of likes, lots of loves, wonderful comments. And if you have been commenting, I stopped responding. There's too many comments to respond, but thank you for all the kind words. And yeah, I hope this inspires you to create your own digital art. And just make sure that you're always being truthful in how you caption it. I captioned it as a composite, explained a little bit how I did it, and hopefully this provides even more transparency. It is a digital piece of art from the moment that I had in time, that I envisioned, and I created out of two photographs that I made while I was there. All right, if you have questions about the eclipse, how I made it, or want some feedback on how you can create works of art like that, just pop your questions into the comments, and otherwise we'll catch you next week.